So a very warm welcome everybody to the Horse Tribe webinar with Dr. Sue Dyson. First of all, Heidi and I from Horse Fest and Horse Tribe thought we would introduce ourselves. So hello, I'm Thea.
And I've done that muted thing already, and I'm Heidi. So hello everybody, lovely to meet you all.
So we're the two horse mad people that have started two parts to the business, which is to support people who love all things horse and want to learn more. So first of all, you may have heard of Horse Fest, the summer festival at Weston Park every July. And secondly, we started these webinars and we'll be bringing together information, articles, great insights from experts from around the world like Dr. Sue Dyson onto our website and into this membership group called Horse Tribe. We're at the very early stages of that, so watch this space. There will be more articles, more webinars, and we'll be pulling together interesting free information that you can tap into as well in addition to that. So a very warm welcome, and we have a little bit of tack to go through before we introduce Sue. Over to Heidi.
Brilliant, okie doke. So just for those of you that aren't familiar with Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, there's three icons. So the chat box, raise hand and Q&A. So just so you're aware, during this webinar, the chat box is disabled. So we won't be using that one or looking in that one at all. We will be using the Q&A. So when you've got a question for Sue, just pop it down in the Q&A and we'll either ask it as we go along, or the majority of questions we'll save for the end, and then put them together in themes for Sue to answer for us. If you want to actually ask a question rather than type it, then do feel free to use the raise hand. And again, when we get to the question section at the end, we'll take you off mute and you can feel free to ask your question personally. So today, just using the Q&A and the raise hand box. And the right hand picture there shows that there's two halves to your screen. You're probably seeing it like that, as I am. And a grey line down the middle. If you want to change the size of the people versus the slides, just move that grey line to the left or the right. And I think that's all we need to know in terms of tech. So now, obviously, the key thing is to introduce you to Sue, who's in where I'm looking, sitting slightly to my left, but who knows where she's on your screen. Sue is, we're delighted to have Sue in the same virtual room as us. Sue is a world-renowned expert in equine orthopedics with a particular interest in lameness and poor performance in sports horses. And Sue's work applies to all horses, whether they're working in professionally as sports horses at the higher levels, or whether they're hacking around the country lanes as our horses are. And today Sue's going to be talking to the title, Is That Normal? And I've got a really personal experience of this over the last few months. What Sue will talk to us about is how to recognise when our horse is or isn't normal, so that we can do something to manage that in a really proactive way, rather than waiting until things are progressed too far and potentially difficult to fix. And my horse Ricky recently became really quite lame, and actually was referred to Sue, and we went down to see Sue near Newmarket. And what I realised was that actually over a period of time there'd been quite a few little behavioural changes that I just really, I guess, ignored, and not really been quite astute enough to think actually all of these things together matter. And my learning, tricky learning really, was that if I'd noticed those things a bit earlier, then perhaps the prognosis for Ricky would be slightly better than it is. Don't worry, Ricky is very happy in the field chomping his grass as we speak, but he won't be going back to competing. So I think this webinar is massively important because it will enable us all to notice some of the things that our horses tell us that we perhaps don't realise and don't recognise, and worst of all, don't do something about. So a huge warm welcome to Sue. I'm sure you'll add a little bit of extra to your intro, but we're really, really delighted that you're here with us at Horse Fest and Horse Tribe today. And I'm going to turn my camera off and shut up and hand over to the expert.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay, so we've already said that this is all about what is normal. And I think that's something which is quite difficult to describe, in fact. I have a lifetime of observing horses. I was a rider, first and foremost, who, because I was a rider, eventually decided that I wanted to become an equine veterinarian. And I've been doing the job now for 41 years, during which time I've listened to many clients talk about their horses, and I've learned a tremendous amount from listening to you, and also from listening to the horses that I've had the privilege of riding. And on the left is one of my superstars, McGinty, who became an advanced level event horse and a grade A show jumper. And when I sold him, he subsequently won the European Junior Show Jumping Championships twice. I have had the privilege of riding many different types of ponies and horses, both my own and other people's, some of which have been non-lame horses, some of which have been difficult horses, and some of which have been lame horses. And from all of those, I've learnt an enormous amount about the things that normal horses do, the things that difficult horses do, and some of the adaptations that lame horses make. As a student, I had the fabulous opportunity to take part in student riding competitions, not only in the UK, but also throughout Europe. And we rode different horses, whatever was presented to us. And the photograph on the top left was one published in a German newspaper entitling me as the English Amazon, because here I was being very successful amongst my European contemporaries. But from those opportunities, again, I had the amazing opportunity to ride different horses and learn from them. On the bottom left, you can see me competing in an Arab flat horse race. I'm on the grey on the left-hand side. So I've done all sorts of different things, and I keep looking and learning. I've also had the opportunity to watch and also receive tuition from a variety of different trainers. I've also worked in dealers' yards and seen the way in which horses are prepared for sale. Some ways nice and some ways not so nice. But from all of that, I've learned. So what have I learned about horses? I've learned how a normal horse feels, and irrespective of the quality of the individual, a normal horse should be willing to go forwards in walk, trot, and canter, and similarly on the left and right reins. Through their development, horses are flight animals, and therefore confronted with an unusual situation, their reaction may be to take off. I've learned quite a lot about learning theory, and I think this is very important. And there's a difference between constant coercion, having to make a horse do something because it doesn't want to, as opposed to giving the horse a sharp reminder, perhaps hitting it hard once, in order to say, that wasn't right, and then immediately rewarding it when it does something right. Horses learn basically by positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement. But there are times when they have to develop confidence in the rider. And in order to develop confidence, we have to be leading them and be positive in the way in which they lead them. There are some horses that develop dangerous behavior, rodeo type bucking, for example, or bolting. And this is usually a learned behavior. Learned behavior as a sequel either to pain or to fright. And those dangerous behaviors, first of all, we have to identify if there is an underlying pain-related cause and manage that pain. And then we have to retrain the horse. I've also learned that horses have to learn how to use their bodies. There are some horses who, as a 3-year-old, may look absolutely fantastic, moving freely in the field or being loose schooled. But as soon as they have a rider on them, they lose that quality of movement. And they have to learn to adapt how to carry the weight of a rider. What have I learnt about riders? And that should also include the term owners, because not all owners are riders. I think, and this is based on many years of experience, there are misconceptions by so many riders about what is or is not normal, both with respect to movement and behavior. And there is this misconception that some horses are inherently grumpy horses. I would like to challenge that, because I think that the majority of so-called grumpy horses are experiencing pain of some sort. And if we remove that pain, then their demeanor will change hugely. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that many owners who've presented their horses for investigation, often rather late in the day, if we have successfully managed their horse's problems, suddenly say, oh, my horse seems so much happier, whereas they had never previously thought of their horse as being unhappy, but they recognize the change to happiness. It has been my observation that some owners and riders are extremely astute observers. They identify the smallest swelling, they identify the smallest change in the horse's behavior, and they often worry considerably about this and seek professional advice very early on, sometimes when actually they don't really need to worry. But there are also a group of riders and owners who are extraordinarily unobservant. And this may be because they fail to notice something. For example, that the horse has a large windgall on its left front limb and not its right front limb, and that it has recently developed. And the reason I say this is that I will often, when presented with a horse, examine the horse, having previously asked the owner if there are any abnormal swellings, to which they've said no. And then I observe what to me is a very abnormal swelling, and I say to the owner, how long has this swelling been here? And they will look at it, and they will look at me rather puzzled and say, well, actually, I have no idea. Or they assume that the swelling is normal for the horse, or the behavior is normal for the horse, and they don't observe anything different. I have to recognize that some problems with respect to horses' performance or their movement may be slow and insidious in its progression, and one-horse riders have nothing with which to compare, so they don't recognize that slow and progressive change in the way in which the horse moves or behaves. Many people are not aware of where their bodies are, their own body posture. So look at the photograph on the left. The rider is sitting extremely asymmetrically. Her right stirrup is much longer than her left. the bottom of the foot of the right leg is horizontal, whereas her left foot, the heel is drawn up. Her shoulders are asymmetrical and her trunk is asymmetrical with concavity on the left-hand side because her whole seat has shifted to the right. When asked if she felt that she was sitting asymmetrically, the rider had no idea. And we can place riders just sitting on a flat surface and they do not know whether or not they are sitting symmetrically or asymmetrically. And I think that knowledge of your own body position is of extreme importance, because it is likely that if you consistently sit asymmetrically as the rider on the left, it is inevitable that your horse will experience adverse consequences as a result of that asymmetrical weight distribution. The final comment on this slide is homebred horses produced by amateurs are often a nightmare. They're a nightmare for me as a veterinarian because frequently these horses have not been taught appropriate discipline. So they become extremely difficult to examine and potentially dangerous to examine. And I think it is extremely important that if you are involved in breeding, that you learn enough about the proper ways to train horses such that they are disciplined individuals. I think that there are a variety of myths in the equestrian world, such as, I've already mentioned this, he's always been a grumpy horse, that's normal for him. I really strongly believe that horses are not grumpy unless they've got an underlying problem. Another quote, he must have been badly treated because he won't stand to be mounted. Well, in my experience, the horse that won't stand to be mounted either won't stand because it's been inappropriately trained, or it won't stand because it is anticipating pain either from the saddle or from the rider or from its own pain when it is worked because it has an underlying musculoskeletal problem. Another common comment from owners is, he's always been heavy in the hand, but my trainer says I must develop more core strength so that I can support the horse and hold him up. Well, appropriately trained horses should not be heavy in the hand. They become heavy in the hand generally because they've got a hind limb pain-related problem, so they don't want to engage sufficiently behind in order to lighten the forehand and lighten your rein contact. Another comment that I so frequently hear when acquiring a horse's history is, he was weak when I bought him, so he's always found canter on the right rein difficult. Well, if he was weak behind, why did he find canter on the right rein difficult and not on the left rein? A normal horse should be reasonably symmetrical on the left and right reins. I will admit that a young horse may find it slightly more difficult on the left rein initially, and then perhaps with progressive training he switches to the right rein and then may switch back to the left rein, but he's not consistently worse on one rein compared with the other unless he has an underlying problem. Another thing that I've heard very frequently is that my trainer says that if the horse's ears are forwards, he cannot be listening to me. Now, do you think that's a true statement or a false statement? Let's have a vote on this. So Heidi or Thea, I think, are going to tell me the results of the poll. Wow, 100% said false. Well, I'm very interested by this because many of my clients would not answer this correctly. They would say this is a true statement. I believe it's a false statement. Oh, and suddenly my slides won't advance, which must be something to do with having had the poll. So I might have to come out of stop sharing, I fear, and start again. Let's try that. Okay. And let's try minimizing that. Share screen. Hooray, we're back in action. So in order to recognize abnormal, I think we need to know what is normal with respect to the horse's resting posture and its resting demeanor, how a horse which is normal moves in walk and trot in hand and in canter on the lunge, how a normal horse behaves when tacked up and mounted, and how a normal horse should perform when ridden, both in walk, trot and canter, performing transitions, what happens when we change diagonal, and what happens when we jump. And I want to ask the question also, how should the horse feel to you as the rider? So a fundamentally important question is, why is it important to recognize what is abnormal? Well, in my experience, most abnormalities reflect underlying discomfort, which may be a primary musculoskeletal problem. For example, the horse is lame. It could be discomfort induced by the tack, or it may be the weight distribution of the rider related to the rider's morphology and size. I very strongly believe that early recognition of a problem and seeking professional advice in order to determine the nature of the problem and the instigation of appropriate management is vitally important for successful treatment, which will result in improved welfare for the horse, improvement in the horse's performance, and also improvement in the rider's comfort. Because I've ridden lots of lame horses and they create pain in me because they adapt by stiffening their bodies. So I get increased forces transmitted through my back, which creates back pain in me. Or the horse's movement may create the saddle moving to one side consistently, and I may try to compensate that by my leg activity, providing me with knee pain. So for three different reasons, equine welfare, improved performance, and improved rider comfort, we need to diagnose problems as early as possible, because then they're going to be more easily managed. Now, many horses which are performing abnormally may swish their tails, lay their ears back, have an intense stare in their eye, as we see in this example in the photograph, are attributed to gastric ulcer syndrome. It was very interesting to read a consensus statement provided by the European College of Equine Internal Medicine. And a group of individuals active in this association performed a review of all the published literature, asking the question, do gastric ulcers themselves, in the absence of other clinical signs, actually have an effect on ridden horse performance? And if you review the literature, there is no evidence to substantiate this fact. And I would always ask the question, have you ever thought why there is such a high prevalence of gastric ulceration? Why is gastric ulceration occurring? And it's my opinion, based on many years of personal experience, that many of these horses develop gastric ulcers because they are being made to work whilst they are experiencing musculoskeletal pain. And if we resolve the musculoskeletal pain, then the horse's behavior will improve and their gastric ulcers will also resolve. So what evidence is there that gastric ulcer syndrome is actually the cause of poor performance? In a recent examination of 193 horses, which were involved in a project when we were evaluating their behavior during tacking up and mounting, 31 of those horses had historically undergone gastroscopy because of poor performance. And in 84% of those 31 horses, ulcers had been identified. And those were all treated appropriately by the use of omeprazole plus or minus other appropriate drugs and management changes. But only 52% of these horses showed owner-reported improvements in performance after treatment. And when examined clinically, the majority of these horses were still lame and still showing abnormalities of performance. So why are we all so confused? I think it's important to recognize that there have been 3 large-scale studies performed independently in the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Switzerland, which has shown that a large proportion of riding school horses are lame. And therefore, when we learn to ride, we are constantly exposed to horses that in fact are lame. They're often stiff horses because they're lame in several different limbs, which balances them out. They're stiff, they're rather slow, and therefore they're safe as riding school horses. But those horses show many behavioral changes, such as having their ears back, such as swishing their tails, and we are acceptant of the fact that that is normal behavior for horses, when in fact it is not. I think that there's a general lack of the understanding of the principles of training and learning behavior. I also think that there is a lack of knowledge and awareness about the influence of saddle fit and rider's size and their position on the horse, and how those factors can influence both the horse's performance and behavior. So let's think about how a normal horse should stand. This is both in the stable and other circumstances. Obviously, they're not always going to stand absolutely squarely, as we see in this horse. We've positioned this horse because this is how we wanted to position it. But what I want you to notice that this horse has even weight distribution of all 4 limbs. A normal horse may rest a hind limb, but look at the posture of this horse. Look at the position of both the forelimbs and the hind limbs. More specifically, look at the position of this line drawn vertically from the front of the elbow region, and this line hits the ground at the toe of the horse's front foot. And if I draw a line on the hind limb from the back of the horse's bum, that's actually where the tuba ischiae are, down to the ground, this line is parallel to the back of the cannon region. Now look at this horse on the left. Is it the same? This horse is standing what we call camped under, both in front and behind. So the line from the front of the elbow region down to the ground no longer hits the ground just in front of the horse's foot. There's a gap between the line and the front of the horse's foot, highlighted by the double-headed arrow. And what about the line from the back of the horse's bum down to the ground? This is no longer parallel to the back of the cannon region. The back of the cannon region is sloped obliquely forwards from the point of the hock to the foot. The other feature to note in this horse, that if we draw a line which is tangential to the jumper's bump region, we can see that that line is above the withers. Most normal horses, the withers are at the same height or higher than the jumper's bump. But in this horse, the withers are lower than the jumper's bump. And this is not necessarily an inherent conformational abnormality. It can be an adaptation in stance to the horse's musculoskeletal pain. If we look at the photograph on the right, the horse has got the right front limb in front of the left front limb. This is a posture that we call pointing. And this horse also tended to stack the bedding underneath the foot in order to make itself more comfortable. Leaning on the manger or leaning the horse's bum against the wall of the stable are also abnormal postures which generally reflect the presence of musculoskeletal pain. Most normal horses lie down every day. If your horse stops lying down, that's probably a reflection of discomfort, either getting down or getting up, again, a reflection of musculoskeletal pain. I'm going to use the term happy with respect to demeanor of normal horses. Most normal horses, most of the time, will have an engaged expression in the eye, as we see in the grey horse on the left. And for most of the time, they will either have their ears forward or their ears rotated outwards, but not back. Compare the grey horse on the left with the chestnut horse in the middle. And this is just after the end of ridden exercise. And look at the expression of its eye. Its eye has a glazed expression or an intense stare or looks zoned out. This is not a normal expression of the horse's eye. This is a reflection of discomfort. And then look at the horse on the right. This is a horse being tacked up. The saddle has just been placed on the horse's back. The ears are flat back. The horse has an intense stare in the eye. We can see exposure of the white of the eye. The mouth is wide open with exposure of the teeth. And compared to the two horses on the left, the nostrils are wrinkled. This is a horse expressing discomfort. Non-lame horses are generally happy athletes, epitomized by Michael Jung's horse, Sam Biostek. This was a wonderful athlete, and if you look at the vast majority of photographs of him, he always looks like a happy horse. So does this pony look happy? And does it look comfortable? Let's have another poll. And do we have any results? So 11% says the pony looks happy and 22% say the pony looks comfortable, whereas the majority say the pony does not look happy and the pony does not look comfortable. Okay, let's see if we're lucky this time. No, we're not lucky. I can't advance, so I'm going to have to go out of screen sharing again, I'm afraid.
Good job, you're experienced on this tack.
Yes, get out of this and get out of this, which won't go. Now we have got a problem because it's completely frozen. Ah, that's better. Okay, let's get rid of this.
I've got the slides on standby, Sue, if you need me to share instead.
I don't know if I'll be able to.
Shall I share?
Try sharing.
Okay. How's that?
Yeah, let me see if I can advance them. No, I still can't advance. Oh, yes, I can.
I'll advance for you. I think I'm small, but you just tell me.
Okay, so why is this pony bearing weight on one forelimb alone? That's because this pony is in canter. Why do I think it looks uncomfortable? I think it looks uncomfortable because it has its ears back, it has a glazed expression in its eye, and for the same reasons, I don't think it looks happy. A happy animal should have its ears forward and should not have that glazed expression. Okay, let's move to the next. So how does a normal horse move in walk and trot in hand? I think we need to look at the horse. We need to listen to the horse. We need to listen to the rhythm. Does it have a regular 1-2, 1-2 trot beat? We need to listen. Is there a toe drag? And we need to listen to whether or not the horse is landing symmetrically on the left and right diagonals. So they should land with an equal resonating sound. And I think it takes time to look at a horse. I don't think you can just watch the horse trot up and down once and say, yes, it's lame, or yes, no, it's no, it's not. So let's go on to the next slide. I need to see the horse move from a variety of different views. So I need to see the horse trot towards me, trot away from me, and from the side. So what am I looking for? Next slide, please. I'm watching the head and neck movement. In a normal horse, the head and neck are relatively still. You might see slight side to side oscillation as the horse goes from one diagonal pair to the other diagonal pair, but the head and neck should stay relatively level. Whereas a lame horse, the head and neck will move up and down. I particularly look at the horse first in the walk because the sequence of footfalls are slower, which enables me to look more closely at the degree to which the fetlocks sink during load bearing on a limb. There should be equal sinking of both the left and right limbs, both the forelimbs and the hind limbs. If the horse is loading the limb less because it's a painful limb, the fetlock will sink less because the horse is protecting that limb. Likewise, if we look at tracking up, does the horse place the hind limb in the imprint of the forelimb or in front of that placement? That is normal. If the horse takes short steps, then the hind limb may not reach the track of the forelimb. And that's something I can better appreciate in walk compared with trot. In a normal horse viewed from behind, there will be symmetrical movement of the hindquarters. However, if you have an Arab horse, as we see here on the left, that assessment may be extraordinarily difficult because of the high tail carriage. And then seeing the horse move in circles and also seeing the horse ridden may facilitate the identification of a normal gait or an abnormal gait. In a normal horse, the hind limbs will follow in the same track as the forelimbs, both when moving in straight lines and in circles. And I also need to look at the overall step length of the horse relative to the type of horse. So if I'm looking at a dressage horse, particularly a warm blood, I expect it to take big steps and look as though it's moving in an extravagant and animated way. Whereas if it's a child's pony, I expect it to have much shorter steps, relatively speaking, and much less suspension between the two diagonal phases of the trot. And I think it's very important that we look overall at step lengths relative to the type of horse, because when we're looking at horses which are performing poorly, they may be performing poorly because they are lame on more than one limb. And if a horse is bilaterally symmetrically lame, either in front or behind, you may not see any overtly lame steps, but what you will see is a shortening in the step length. Next slide, please. So how does a normal horse move on the lunge in both trot and canter? The horse should have symmetrical trunk orientation on the left and the right reins, whereas a horse which has got musculoskeletal pain, you will often see they lean their trunk inwards more on one rein compared with the other. Next slide, please. So I'm looking to see how well is the horse balanced? Is the horse looking where it's going around the circle, or is it bending its head and neck slightly to the outside of the circle to help to compensate for the fact that it's leaning its trunk inwards in order to try to maintain its balance? The horse should move with a consistent rhythm. Many lame horses will either slow the rhythm because they're less keen to go forwards, or they may react by hurrying, or they may keep varying in their rhythm, whereas a normal horse has a consistent rhythm. There should be swing of the back and therefore swing of the tail. The tail is a very good indicator of the way in which the horse is moving its back, because effectively the coccygeal vertebrae in the tail are an extension of the horse's back. I'm looking at limb flight. The hind limb should follow the course of the forelimb on the same side. This horse pictured on the left, although it's well balanced and looking around the circle in the direction in which it's going, if you look carefully, the inside hind limb is crossing underneath the trunk of the horse towards the opposite forelimb, and this is a compensatory movement for hind limb lameness. I like to see the horse perform transitions from walk to trot and trot to canter. And when moving from walk to trot, the horse should move progressively without jumping into trot. And the horse should canter easily on both reins. Press advance, please. Some people say, but my horse isn't used to being lunged, and therefore how can you expect it to move similarly on the left and right reins? Well, my personal observation is that even if horses are not regularly lunged, the normal horse does move with the correct balance and rhythm and body posture, whereas a lame horse does not. Next slide, please. So I think that because many horses can look clinically normal in hand and on the lunge, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be normal when they're ridden. And so therefore, for me to assess normality, it's really important that I see the horse ridden. But it's also important that I observe the horse during tacking up and mounting, because I believe that there are behaviors that are abnormal during tacking up and mounting that reflect pain either arising from the saddle or arising during ridden exercise through musculoskeletal pain or pain induced by the rider. So during tacking up and mounting, the normal horse should look like this. It should have its ears forward. It should have an engaged expression in its eye. It shouldn't be constantly fidgeting. All its limbs should be on the ground. Now, in the picture on the right, the horse has changed position. The horse changed position because the rider asked it to change its position. You can see the white of the eye, but this is because this horse has a small iris, and therefore this exposure of the white of the eye is normal for it. Next slide, please. So grumpy behavior is not normal. We demonstrated in a recent behavior when we evaluated the presence or absence of 64 abnormal behaviors during tacking up and during placement of the bridle, placement of the saddle and girthing, that the rate of abnormal behavior was higher in lame horses versus non-lame horses, and that tight tree points were also associated with higher behavior scores. Next slide, please. Mounting. The normal horse will stand still. We recorded the presence or absence of 30 abnormal behaviors during mounting, and higher static saddle fit scores were associated with higher behavior scores, and the presence of lameness was also associated with higher behavior scores. Next slide, please. So I'm showing photographs here of two upper level competition horses. These aren't clinically normal horses. They're moving in a consistent rhythm with animation, impulsion, regular speed. They're willing. They have a fluent movement through the back. There's a lack of tension, and these horses are obedient. Whatever the level of horses, these factors should remain consistent. The horse should look happy, move freely forwards, and do so with really pushing from behind and maintaining a consistent rhythm and being obedient. Next slide, please. When I'm looking at a horse moving under saddle, I want to watch it perform walk, trot, canter, and transitions. And I want to look at it from a variety of different perspectives. I want to see it from behind. So if the horse is working on the left rein, I'm going to stand in the AF corner, and that way I can see the horse moving from behind. Advance, please. From the side, advance, please, and coming towards me. Advance, please. And if I'm going to watch the horse on the right rein, I stand in the AK corner and see again the horse moving from behind, from the side, and from the front. But the assessment can be done anywhere. It doesn't need to be done in an arena. I can do it out in a field or even watching the horse hacking. Next slide, please. So what do I look for from the front? I want to see that there is no head nod in rhythm with the trot. I want to see that the horse is moving straight. I want to see that the head is in a vertical position and not tilted either to the left or to the right. And I want to look at the horse's facial expression to see that the horse looks happy. Next slide, please. From the side, I'm looking at the limb flight, the step length, the absence of toe drag, the absence of movement of the head and neck. I want to see that the horse's head is approximately in a vertical position if it's been schooled to work properly on the flat. I want the rider to be able to tell me that there is an even tension in the left and right reins, and I want to observe that the bit is in a symmetrical position. I want to see that there is adequate flexion of the lumbosacral joint and the horse is moving in balance. Next slide, please. And from behind, I want to look at limb flight, the absence of toe drag, symmetry of movement of the hindquarters, movement of the back reflected by the movement of the tail, and the tail should oscillate from side to side in rhythm with the trot. And I want to see that the horse is moving straight. I also want to see the position and movement of the saddle. The saddle should stay in the midline. It shouldn't oscillate, obviously, from left to right or slip consistently to one side, and it should not bounce. Next slide, please. In canter, can you continuously see the cantle of the saddle as we do in this horse on the left? Or advance, please. As we can see on the right in the left-hand picture, the cantle is almost being hidden, whereas on the right you can obviously see the canter. The cantle of the saddle is being hidden because the horse is croup high and on the forehand because it is experiencing hind limb pain. The other abnormal features to note in these photographs are that the tail is being held to the left consistently. This is not normal. In the left-hand picture, the horse is moving on 3 tracks with the left hind limb on an inner track, which is not normal. And also the saddle is consistently slipping to the right, which is also not normal. Next slide, please. I think it's hugely valuable to see horses ridden in 10-meter diameter circles in rising trot. The horse should turn easily and similarly to the left and to the right. The limb flight should stay straight and follow, so the inside hind limb should follow the track of the inside forelimb. The horse should maintain a similar body posture on the left and right reins, maintain a similar rhythm, maintain a similar head and neck position, and there should be no evidence of lameness. This is biomechanically a more demanding movement than going around the periphery of the arena and 20-meter diameter circles. 12-meter diameter circles are too easy. They have to be 10-meter diameter circles, and any horse should be able to do this in the way in which I've described. Next slide, please. The normal canter is a 3-beat gait with a period of suspension. So we start with the outside or trailing hind limb, followed by the inside hind limb or the leading hind limb and the outside forelimb, and then placement of the inside forelimb or the leading forelimb, and then a period of suspension. A normal horse will rock the rider's pelvis backwards and forwards. It should not result in a rotatory motion of the rider's pelvis. We should see good spatial and temporal separation between placement of the hind limbs. If the horse bunny hops behind, that is not normal. Next slide, please. So a normal horse should perform transitions to canter with equal ease on both the left and the right reins, or indeed in straight lines. It should be able to sustain canter without coercion. It should not become disunited or break spontaneously. And a so-called 4-beat canter, and that is a canter without a period of suspension, as we see in the photograph on the right. So we can see that the horse has placed the right hind limb, the outside hind limb, and is already placing the outside forelimb to the ground. There is going to be no period of suspension. This is a 4-beat canter and is not normal. It reflects underlying pain. And the reason I know it reflects underlying pain is that if I take away the pain by nerve blocks, the horse will canter normally. And I have to admit that some horses have to learn how to canter with the weight of a rider. Next slide, please. So this horse is cantering very abnormally. So in the picture on the left, it's placing the outside or trailing forelimb, the right forelimb, landing in advance of the opposite hind limb. And then in the middle photograph, it breaks over the right forelimb before the opposite hind limb. Let's see the same horse in the field in the next slide, cantering. In a completely different environment with a large open space, this horse, without too much difficulty, suddenly learns how to canter correctly. And I think that some people do far too much work in an arena and don't allow their horse to develop their paces in a more natural environment. And this horse, as you can see, was transformed when it learned how to canter properly by being allowed freedom in a huge field. Next slide, please. The horse's reaction to being on a long rein or a loose rein should be that the horse stretches its head and neck forwards and downwards with the nose extended outwards. If the horse has got its head behind the vertical, that is not normal. That may reflect a training error, but it also may reflect musculoskeletal pain. Next slide, please. We need to look at the horse's gait, comparing hard and soft surfaces. Does it have a similar step length? Is it equally willing? Does it maintain a regular rhythm? If it's on a road, does it avoid the camber of the road or the slope of the road? Does it move similarly on rough terrain compared with soft terrain? If the answer is no, that probably reflects the presence of an underlying problem. Next slide, please. So I think we can look at horses' performance in an arena versus hacking out. And if the owner says to me, the horse is so much more willing hacking out compared with within an arena, I say probably to myself that this horse probably has musculoskeletal pain, which is induced by the movements it's asked to do in the arena, because the horse should move similarly, both in an arena and when out hacking. Next slide, please. Going up and downhill, the horse should move straight, it should move willingly, it should be able to move in balance, and you should feel that the horse is got adequate power, pushing itself, propelling itself uphill. Next slide, please. The horse should be relatively consistent in its performance. It might experience a little bit of difficulty when learning new movements. If you ask it repeatedly to do that new movement, because it's moving in a different way, it may experience delayed onset muscular stiffness. So within 24 to 48 hours, it may be experiencing some muscular pain. And we need to give it a little time to recover from that. But a horse which performs well on one day and then has 2 bad days and then has a good day and then has several bad days, that's not normal. I think that we also need to realize that horses can develop musculoskeletal strength and coordination by doing a variety of different exercises under a variety of different conditions. And so much of this does not have to be done in an arena. And I think we have become too much conditioned to doing too much work in an arena. Next slide, please. So what about jumping? A normal horse should jump straight, should jump with equal push-off from both hind limbs, should jump with the rider feeling that it's got adequate power, should land with the correct form leading, should make a nice bascule over the fence, and should make distances in combination fences without difficulty. Next slide, please. So what I often hear is, my horse has never liked flat work, but loves jumping. He never stops. He usually does a double clear in the show jumping and the cross country. He must be okay. So is this true or is it false? Let's have a poll. So do we have some answers? It's false. You are an amazing audience, absolutely amazing, because it's not what my clients tell me. Of course it's false, because the horse loves jumping The adrenaline and endorphins circulate in the body and help it to love jumping. But this is what I frequently hear. People say the horse must be okay because it jumps okay. Let's ask the next question. Is this horse jumping correctly? It's got a lovely shape in front. Its ears are forward. It's got a lovely expression in its eye. Lovely folding of the forelimbs. But look, this horse is not pushing equally off both hind limbs. This horse is not a normal horse. Next slide, please. So some horses continue to jump well despite deterioration in their flat work. So here we have a horse competing at Burley, looks horrible working on the flat, but loves it jumping and jumps are fantastically around. Next slide, please. So how or what should you as the rider feel? And this applies to you in an arena or hacking out or wherever you are. If you change diagonals in trot, the horse should feel similar on the left and the right diagonals. You should not feel that there's a difference. You should feel that you have an equal tension in both the left and right reins. The horse should turn similarly to the left and to the right with equal ease. The horse should work in a regular rhythm. You should feel that the horse's back is swinging underneath you. You shouldn't feel a jarring sensation in sitting trot or canter. And you should feel that your pelvis is being rocked backwards and forwards in canter. You shouldn't feel like you're sitting, being rotated like you're in a washing machine. And next slide, please. So there are obviously other factors which are going to influence comfort and performance, and that's going to relate to the athletic demands placed on the horse's natural ability, and the skill of the rider, either facilitating balance and an easy performance, as epitomized by William Fox Pitt here, or making it more difficult for the horse. Next slide, please. Is bucking or rearing normal? And I would say it depends. If you look at this horse rearing on the left, its ears are back and it's got an intense expression in its eye, and it showed other behavioral signs consistent with pain. But one of my superstars was a horse that reared. He didn't show any other behavioral signs. I bought him knowing he was a rearer. He very rapidly went to advanced level in eventing and subsequently competed in 2 Olympic Games. I don't think that horse had a physical problem, but his only problem was rearing, and with appropriate training, that rearing behavior could be managed. So it depends whether these behaviors occur alone or in association with other potentially abnormal behaviors. Next slide, please. So my take-home messages are: learn what is normal, monitor your horse's performance and behavior, keep a log. If you're fortunate enough to have an arena and you can look in the mirror, look in the mirror. Don't ignore change, either in performance or behavior. Video recordings, look back at those and look at a current one. Has the horse changed? Look at photographs. They can be very revealing. And I think that regular MOTs of both the horse and the rider are pretty important. Keep looking and keep learning. Next slide, please. I would like to thank you for being the audience, and I would like to thank all the horses that I've had the opportunity of riding under a variety of different circumstances, from which I have learned so much. So now it's over to you for any questions.
Thank you, Sue. That was amazing as ever. So folks, if you can type your questions, any questions that you've got for Sue, Sue's willing to answer any questions, even if they go sort of left or right of the presentation today, I'm sure. In the meantime, whilst you guys are typing, I've got a couple of questions I've picked up off Messenger on Facebook. So If I ask mine whilst folks are typing, Sue, if that's okay.
Yep.
So question 1 is, would you be concerned if a horse rests a hind limb regularly?
Resting hind limbs is a normal behavior in horses, but if it rests one hind limb considerably more than the opposite hind limb, then it would give me some cause for concern, because most horses will alternate and not preferentially rest one hind limb compared with the other.
Brilliant, thank you. And another one here. My horse tilts his head from the poll to the right on the left rein. Should I be concerned?
Well, it depends, once again, if it shows other abnormal behaviors. Because if it only does that and nothing else, it could be a training problem. It could have a problem within its mouth. It might not be comfortable with the bit. It might have some neck pain. So I wouldn't regard it as normal, but I wouldn't regard it either as a disaster. But I would certainly start by looking inside the horse's mouth, because it could be something really, really simple, like he's got corner cracks in the mouth or something like, or he's uncomfortable with the bit, yeah. Or even the bit may have some sharp edges that you were not aware of.
Yeah, so just look closely, I guess, is the key thing there, yeah. We've got a question come through on the Q&A. Would a 4-year-old recently broken that bunny hops into canter be a concern? Or would you say this could just be that the horse is young and hasn't yet learnt the aids properly?
If I was out hacking with this horse, and this is how I would be monitoring this type of thing, going out in a straight line, and if he bunny hops outside in a straight line, that's not normal. He should be able to canter in a straight line without the corner coming up to him, without bunny hopping. And if he's bunny hopping in a straight line, that's not normal.
Okay, thank you. And again, can a horse with a sway back be sound and perform to a high level? And if so, how, given their conformation?
Compete to a high level, I think the answer is probably no, but at a lower level, they may be completely sound. You saw the example I showed of a normal behavior during tacking up in a colored cob type, which had a very dipped back conformation. And that horse was perfectly comfortable doing the job that it was being asked to do. But had that horse been asked to jump big fences, and I think it would have struggled. Had it been asked to work at a high level in dressage, I think it probably would have struggled.
Great. So is the message that if the horse has a problem, it doesn't mean they can't do anything. It just means that you need to think about what's the job being asked and what's the current situation with the horse.
Absolutely. I think there are many horses which have got low grade problems who can still do a job, but you have to be realistic about what it is reasonable to ask that horse to do.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I think circumstances have changed because so many more people now are doing so much more work in arenas because they don't have safe places to hack. And I think that's a really unfortunate situation. And I think if you're in that situation, it's really worthwhile, if you have the ability to do so, to put your horse in a trailer or in a horse box and take it somewhere where you can safely hack, because I think that difference in work environments and the terrain on which the horses are working and the footing on which they're working is so important for musculoskeletal health and for their mental well-being as well.
I guess it's a bit like us going to the gym every day and doing a full-on workout rather than actually going for a walk sometimes as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another question here. Do you have a schooling tip for horses staying sound? To help horses stay sound?
Well, I think I've already introduced the concept of cross-training. So cross-training, doing a variety of different jobs. So even if your horse is destined to be a dressage horse, unless it has a complete aversion to jumping or has complete lack of technique, then to do some little gymnastic exercises is a good thing. Yeah. To take that horse hacking is also a good thing. And even if you're just walking up and down hills on a slope going obliquely across the hill, teaches the horse how to place its limbs better and enhances their ability to know where their limbs are and develop greater coordination, which I think is fundamentally important for a horse in any discipline. And to learn how to adapt to work on different surfaces. Because if you're always schooling in your arena, where you're going to go and compete or have a lesson may be a totally different type of surface, and the horse has got to get used to working on a variety of different surfaces.
Brilliant, good tip, thank you. Another question off Facebook. What's your view on a horse yawning and in anticipation of putting its bridle on?
Just yawning and showing no other abnormalities of behaviour, I don't think is abnormal necessarily, unless it's on a repeated basis. But most pain-free horses don't yawn. It is regarded as a behaviour that happens more in horses which show other stereotypic type behaviours, which are often stress-induced. And in the majority of normal horses, they don't yawn. But I wouldn't be worried if that was the only abnormal behaviour they showed during tacking up. But if they also moved their heads up and down, put their ears back, showed an intense stare, picked up a forelimb, swished their tail, fidgeted, those would all be additional behaviours which you need to pay attention to.
Great.
And we're going to talk more about this in the 4th of our series of lectures.
Absolutely, yeah, looking forward to that too. One more from our audience today. Do you think lameness always gets picked up by vets at international competitions, or do you see horses competing that you'd consider to actually be lame?
That's a very good question. I think we have strong evidence that not all lameness gets picked up, because we know that there is much more lameness evident in horses ridden compared with in hand. So the trot ups at international competitions are going to miss horses which show gait abnormalities when they're ridden. So I have looked at horses warming up for dressage at Badminton and Burghley and correlate and recorded the data, and unquestionably a small proportion show intermittent lameness during warm-up or show poor quality canter that we know is pain induced. The same applies at Grand Prix dressage level. There are a proportion of the horses there that I know, through having watched hundreds of videos of horses performing Grand Prix dressage, show some elements of lameness, often only in specialized movements, however, not all the time. But in saying that, I strongly believe that if we identified those horses and identified the cause of their problems, we could treat those horses potentially and improve their performances, which has to be a win-win situation for everybody, if you can improve their performance and also improve their welfare.
I'm intrigued. Would you say, therefore, that the trot up should include a ridden element at a competition?
No, I'm not saying that, because I think that there are many horses with low-grade problems who are not unduly suffering and can compete at a high level satisfactorily, and their problems remain consistent. But if the horse, for example, lacks a suspension phase in its canter, which you're never going to pick up in the likelihood of that watching the horse trot in hand, I believe those horses with a stiff stilted canter have an underlying problem which could potentially be treated to the benefit of performance and welfare.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much for answering all those questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time on the question front. But I think it might be useful for people to know that you're going to be coming back and talking to us about some other similar but well, related but kind of separate subjects over the next few months. Next time on the 27th of May. So back here again, 7:30 for that one. Do you mind just popping? Oh, I'm on the slide. I'm in control. Dear me. So we've got another couple of webinars coming up. One on the 13th of May, which is Liz Daniels talking about plaiting and polishing like a pro, so turn out and how to make our ponies look beautiful. And if you're like me, how to not go to the show and realise it's something you've forgotten, such as cleaning your boots or doing the tail or something. And then, as you said, 27th of May, Sue's back again. And then you're back in, let me get this right.
Next slide, yeah.
Sorry, there we go, 3 webinars. So back, I think it is the 27th of May, 27th, 26th of August and the 21st of October. All to share more insights with us. So a massive thank you to you from us and from Horse Tribe followers. It's been awesome to hear your views and your expertise and to listen to all of your examples. And actually it's given a lot of food for thought of not just assuming that things are normal, but maybe just looking a second time and really trying to think a bit more deeply about what we see rather than making assumptions. So thank you massively for that. As we leave the webinar, there'll be a quick survey come up, which would be really great if people could fill in and also make any suggestions for future webinars, because we'd love to make sure we're delivering things that people want.
Yes, thank you very much, Sue, and goodbye everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.